A billionaire stunned an entire room when he bought a broke single-mom waitress at a secret auction only to be shattered by the truth she was hiding. He thought he was buying a surrogate. He had no idea he was about to meet the one thing his money could never control. Before we jump into today's story, take a moment to share where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories reach and connect with amazing viewers like you. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the new story. Now, get comfortable, and let's dive into the story. I had 3 days before my landlord threw my son and me out into the Texas dust. The notice was still taped to the peeling doorframe when I stepped outside that morning, the red letters screaming louder than my own heartbeat. By the time I reached the diner for my shift, I'd already rehearsed a dozen lies to tell Liam about why the lights kept flickering and why dinner had shrunk to noodles and dry toast. The diner offered no mercy either, half-drunk truckers slurring for refills, a manager who watched every minute like he was measuring my worth in pennies, and tips barely enough to cover gas. I moved faster, smiled harder, hid deeper. No one saw the way my hands shook when I opened the empty refrigerator at home. No one saw Liam quietly push away his bowl so I could pretend I wasn't hungry. The first blow came when the landlord texted to say he was cutting the deadline short. 3 days had become 1. I begged my manager for extra hours, but he didn't even look up from his clipboard. That night the diner was dead. No customers, no tips, no chance. Every door I opened slammed back in my face, and the walls were closing in fast. That was when Marcus Sterling walked in. He'd been a regular for weeks, polite, quiet, observant in a way that felt too sharp. I set down his coffee, and he studied me as if he could see the whole mess unraveling beneath my apron. "Ever thought about changing your life?" he asked. I laughed it off, but something in his eyes told me he already knew I was drowning. When he left, he slid a black envelope across the counter. "Sterling Foundation, private gala. One night, one chance," he said, his voice low and certain. I didn't want whatever this was too shiny, too secret, too far from my world. But that night, Liam tugged my sleeve and asked if we had anything besides noodles for dinner. I told him we'd make it fun, but when he turned away, I bit my tongue hard enough to taste metal. That black envelope sat on the counter like it was daring me to touch it. Later, as the apartment fell silent, I stood by the window holding the invitation. The electricity cut out again, plunging everything into darkness except for the rattling cough from Liam's bedroom. My breath fogged against the cold glass. "I will do anything," I whispered to the night, clutching the envelope tighter. "Anything, as long as he never has to sleep on the street." The lights stayed off. The fear stayed on, and with one tremor of my hand, I knew I'd already made the decision that would change everything, though I had no idea what I was walking into or what it would take from me. The dress Marcus sent didn't feel like it belonged on my body. I had scrubbed grease off tables that same morning. Now I stared at myself in a mirror, hair curled, skin powdered, wrapped in midnight blue. I didn't recognize the woman looking back. "Tonight, I'm not Ariana Hale," I breathed out shakily. "Tonight I'm something being evaluated. And maybe sold." The hotel hosting the gala towered over Dallas like a monument built for people who never worried about bills. Inside, chandeliers spilled golden light over men in tailored tuxedos and women draped in gemstones. A pianist played something soft and expensive. Every instinct told me I shouldn't be here. The other women moved with too much confidence, too much understanding of how these nights worked. I was the only one still pretending this was a charity event. A woman beside me leaned in. "If you're chosen," she whispered, "your life changes, but not in the ways you think." Before I could ask what that meant, Marcus appeared and guided me deeper into the glittering maze. He led me toward a raised platform lit by a single spotlight. "This is where sponsors make their selections," he said lightly, as if explaining seating arrangements. "Everything is legal on paper." His tone made the words feel like smoke. My pulse thundered as I stepped toward the stage. I understood then. This wasn't philanthropy. It was a marketplace. The spotlight hit me hard, bleaching the edges of my vision. Men turned to look curious, calculating, intrigued. I stood frozen as the host read from a polished card, reducing my existence to a few flattering phrases. 25 years old, promising potential, a suitable candidate for long-term private sponsorship. My stomach twisted. I wasn't a candidate. I was a commodity. The bidding started low at first 50,000, then a quick jump to 120. My knees wobbled as voices climbed over one another. 300,000. 400. I swallowed hard, thinking of Liam wrapped in my coat at night because the heater had died again. I hated myself for standing there. I hated myself more for knowing I couldn't walk away. Then the room fell silent. A single voice, deep, controlled, expensive, cut clean through the noise. $1 million. Head snapped toward the back of the hall. Mine did too, and that was the first time I saw him. Alexander Pierce. Tall, impossibly composed. A presence so commanding the air itself seemed to shift around him. The host stuttered. No one dared challenge the number. No one dared challenge him. The gavel dropped. My fate sealed with it. And as Alexander's eyes locked onto mine, I felt the floor tilt beneath me because I understood that whatever I'd just been bought for, it wasn't going to be anything I could have prepared for. $1 million kept echoing in my skull as 2 security guards led me off the stage and down a carpeted hallway that felt too soft for my shaking legs. I didn't know what terrified me more, being treated like something to be bought, or being priced so high I couldn't possibly run from whatever waited behind those doors. The farther we walked, the heavier the air became, until it felt like I was stepping into a verdict I didn't agree to hear. The guards opened a set of double doors to a VIP suite on the 40th floor. The silence inside was sharp enough to cut through my breath. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering sprawl of Dallas, but all I could hear was the frantic thud of my own heartbeat. And there he was, back turned, one hand tucked into his pocket, the city lights reflecting off the glass and outlining the shape of a man who looked as untouchable as the skyline. When Alexander Pierce finally turned to face me, it felt like the entire room narrowed to the space between us. His eyes were steady, unreadable, almost surgical in the way they took me in. "You know why I chose you," he said, not asked, said. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. He stepped closer, voice low and precise. "Because you weren't performing. You were terrified, but you stood your ground. Most people don't." I didn't know what to say to a man who could see straight through me, so I stayed silent. He moved to a sleek black table and placed a thick folder on top of it. "I'll be direct," he said, as if anything about this night could be subtle. "I need a surrogate." Oh, the word slammed into me harder than any bid from the crowd. He didn't wait for my reaction. "There's a genetic condition in my family. My mother died young. I don't intend to risk that again. I want complete medical oversight, absolute control of the process, and no emotional involvement." He pushed the folder toward me. "This contract outlines the terms." My fingers hovered above the cover but didn't touch. Alexander flipped to the final page. "You will carry the child. You'll be compensated for life. And after delivery, you will leave. Permanently. No legal or personal connection to the baby." Something inside me recoiled so violently I had to take a step back. "I can't," I choked out. "I can't have a baby and just walk away from it." His expression didn't change, but something in his jaw tightened. "Then you're free to go," he said calmly. "No one will force you." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a worn photograph, and set it beside the contract. A woman with kind eyes and a tired smile. "But I don't have another option," he added quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he closed the folder, sliding it toward me one last time. "You have 24 hours. I'm not buying a person. I'm buying consent." He stepped back as Marcus entered the room, ready to escort me out. At the door, I hesitated. Alexander's gaze met mine sharp, unreadable, holding something I didn't know how to name. "If you return," he said softly, "your life will not be the same." In the car, the city lights blurred through the windows. I forced myself to open the contract, scanning the pages until I reached the number at the bottom 7 digits, cold and heavy. Then I looked at my phone. Liam's school picture lit up the screen, his smile bright and oblivious. $1 million could save him, but the price might destroy me. The refrigerator door opened with a hollow groan, revealing a single carton of milk and half a stick of butter. That was all. Liam padded into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes. "Mom, what are we having tonight?" he asked, cheerful in the way children are when they don't understand how close the world is to collapsing. And I realized poverty had its own smell, a mixture of cold air, fear, and failing options. That night I wrapped Liam in my coat because his blanket wasn't enough against the draft slipping through the cracked window. The stack of unpaid bills on the table felt like a countdown. Rent, utilities, past due notices with red ink that glared at me like accusations. If we lost the apartment, there was nowhere to go. Shelters were full. The car barely ran. I could keep my pride, or I could keep my son safe. Not both. I sat by the bed and watched Liam sleep, tracing the soft outline of his cheek. How could I bring another child into the world, only to abandon it? How could I justify choosing one baby over another? Every answer hurt. Every path felt wrong. But one of them kept Liam warm, fed, and sheltered. One of them didn't. At sunrise, I found myself standing outside the hotel again. Marcus was already waiting in the lobby, like he'd known exactly when I'd walk in. He led me to a quiet room with a single table and 2 chairs. The contract lay open, pen placed neatly beside it. "Take your time," he said, though his eyes told me there was no time left at all. My hand trembled so violently I had to grip the pen twice before it steadied. I thought of Liam's thin blanket, the eviction notice, the hunger in his voice when he asked about dinner. I thought of the way he still smiled through it all. "Liam has to live," I whispered to myself, and then I signed. When the final stroke dried on the page, the air shifted. It was done. I had crossed the line between who I was and who I would have to become. Alexander entered the room minutes later. He didn't look victorious. He didn't even look relieved. He looked solemn. "I will honor every term," he said, and for the first time, his voice held something almost human. Not warmth, but gravity. A driver escorted me and Liam to a private jet waiting on the runway. Liam pressed his face to the window, thrilled by the idea that his mom had gotten a big new job. I clutched the contract inside my coat pocket, its edges sharp against my ribs. Every bump of the plane reminded me of the life I had agreed to give away. Pierce Estate appeared beyond the tree line like something out of a magazine. Massive stone walls, acres of manicured gardens, windows that reflected the sky. Liam gasped. "Mom, do rich people live in castles?" he whispered. I didn't know how to answer. Inside, the rooms were warm and bright, a jarring contrast to our apartment's dim chill. Gloria Winfrey, the head housekeeper, greeted us with a gentle smile that softened the hard edges of the mansion. "You're safe here," she said. "Both of you." I wanted to believe her, but when I stepped into the bedroom Alexander had prepared for me, luxurious, immaculate, bigger than our whole apartment, I felt my chest tighten. I wasn't stepping into comfort. I was stepping into a contract, and as I set my bag down, the truth settled over me like a shadow. I had signed to save my son, but I might have signed away myself. I woke to silk sheets and sunlight pouring across a room big enough to swallow my entire old apartment, yet I felt smaller than I ever had in my life. The ceiling soared above me. The furniture gleamed. The air carried the faint smell of polished wood and money, but none of it felt like mine. I was a guest, not even that, really. A temporary occupant waiting for a purpose to be assigned. I stood in the center of the room and wrapped my arms around myself. For the first time since signing the contract, the reality of where I was and what I had agreed to do pressed down with full weight. Alexander met me in the dining room with the formality of a man addressing an employee. He didn't sit. He didn't make small talk. He simply slid a printed schedule toward me, each line precise. Medical evaluations, nutrition plans, approved activities, restricted areas of the estate. "This arrangement is contractual," he said. "We keep emotions out of it." His tone was smooth and cold, the tone of someone who had mastered the art of sealing off every vulnerable edge. I nodded, even though my throat tightened. I wasn't here to be understood. I was here to perform a role. Dr. Noah Sandler arrived shortly after. He was soft-spoken, gentle in a way that felt startling against the sharp lines of the mansion. His examinations were thorough but respectful. He explained each step of the fertility process, answered every question I didn't know how to form, and never once made me feel like a biological vessel. If Alexander was the steel of this arrangement, Noah was the quiet humanity. Still, every time I left his office, I felt the invisible leash tethering me to a future that had already been decided. Days passed inside the estate, but they didn't feel like days, more like carefully measured increments of silence. Even with staff moving through the halls, the house felt cold, polished, curated. Liam spent most of his time in the room near mine, drawing or watching videos for school. I tried to pretend this place was safe, but I couldn't shake the constant fear that one wrong word, one wrong move, would unravel everything. Every time a servant passed, I wondered if they could see the truth on my face that I didn't belong here. Alexander observed me with the distance of someone evaluating data. At meals, he watched how much I ate, whether I slept enough, whether I seemed stressed. It wasn't unkind, it was clinical. But sometimes, when he caught sight of me tucking Liam into bed or smoothing his hair, something flickered behind his eyes. Regret? Longing? No, I told myself. I was imagining it. Whatever lived inside that man's expression was buried too deep for anyone to reach. One afternoon I found him in the music room, surrounded by dustless shelves and a black grand piano. He didn't hear me at first. He was holding a framed photograph, fingertips tracing the edge. The woman in the picture had the same sharp cheekbones he did, but her smile was soft. When he noticed me in the doorway, he shut the emotion down instantly. "Don't come in here," he said, voice clipped. I backed away, heart racing. Even his grief was gated behind walls I wasn't allowed to approach. The incident should have warned me, but the true crack in our arrangement emerged unexpectedly. I was helping one of the staff clean up a broken bowl when a small photograph slid from my jacket pocket and drifted to the floor. Liam's grin beamed from the glossy cardstock. Before I could grab it, a hand closed over it. Alexander's sharp breath cut the air. "Who is this?" he asked, eyes narrowing with the cold precision of someone assembling a puzzle they didn't know existed. "My son," I whispered. The words dropped like stones between us. "You have a child," he said flatly. "Not a question, a verdict." "And you signed a contract without disclosing that?" Anger tightened every line of his face. Not loud anger, controlled, lethal anger, the kind born from betrayal. "I was afraid you wouldn't choose me," I said, voice shaking. "I needed to save him, too." He didn't answer. He just turned and walked out, leaving the photograph discarded on the table like evidence. That night, I heard footsteps pacing the hallway outside my room. A door opening, a door closing. Someone unable to sleep. I pressed my hand to my chest, wishing I could explain, wishing he would understand. He wasn't angry because of the lie. He was angry because lies had shaped the worst parts of his life. I didn't know that fully yet, but the truth was already unfolding in the tightness of his voice and the stiffness of his posture. The next morning, a knock echoed through my door. I opened it to find Alexander standing there, rigid but composed. "Get ready," he said. "We need to discuss Liam." It wasn't a threat, but it wasn't safety either. It was something in between a hinge the entire house seemed to turn on, and I had no idea which way it would swing. When Alexander told me that Liam would live with us, I genuinely forgot how to breathe. We stood in his office, sunlight cutting through the tall windows in sharp bands, and I waited for the catch, for the punishment, the ultimatum, the consequence of hiding my son. But none came. "Liam stays," he repeated, as if stating a business decision. A child shouldn't suffer for the decisions of an adult. I stared at him, barely able to form words. "Why?" I whispered. He hesitated, the smallest fracture in his controlled exterior. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without a mother," he said. "I won't make him live that." His voice wasn't soft, but it carried something raw and unguarded. The confession wasn't for sympathy, it was a truth he had never meant to share, and it pierced something inside me so deeply that my knees almost buckled. Tears rose before I could stop them. I covered my mouth, overwhelmed by a kind of relief so sharp it hurt. For weeks I had lived split in half, mother in one direction, contract in the other. Suddenly Alexander had removed the blade pressing between them. For the first time since stepping into this mansion, I felt something close to safety. Liam's arrival transformed the estate. He burst through the front doors with a backpack bouncing and eyes wide like he'd stepped into a movie set. "Mom, this place has 2 staircases," he shouted, his voice echoing through the vaulted entryway. He hugged Gloria with the instant affection children give to kind people, and she laughed, wiping her eyes as if she hadn't expected happiness to walk in the door that morning. I braced myself for awkwardness between Alexander and Liam, but I underestimated them both. Liam approached him with fearless curiosity. "Are you the boss here?" he asked, head tilted. Alexander blinked, momentarily disarmed. "Something like that," he replied. What followed stunned me. Liam fired off questions about helicopters, stock markets, the security cameras, and why the library had its own ladder, and Alexander, infamous for his brevity, answered every single one. There was a moment, fleeting but unmistakable, when Alexander actually smiled. A small, reluctant curve of the lips. I almost dropped the tray I was holding. Gloria leaned toward me later and whispered, "He hasn't smiled like that in 15 years. My heart lodged itself somewhere high in my chest. As days folded into each other, the house began to shift around us. Breakfast became a ritual. Liam chatting, me making sure he ate enough, Alexander reading the paper but glancing up more often than he pretended to. In the afternoons, Liam coaxed Alexander into playing catch badly. Every time the billionaire missed the ball, Liam cackled, and Alexander took the teasing with a patience I didn't know he had. One night I stepped onto the terrace to clear my mind. The city glimmered below, and the air was cool enough to sting my cheeks. I didn't hear Alexander approach until he held out a cup of tea. "You should drink something warm," he said. He didn't turn to leave. For a moment we just stood there, close enough to share breath, but not touching. "Thank you," I murmured. He nodded, then added quietly, "And thank you for trusting me with him." My chest tightened at the honesty in his tone. Weeks passed, and the medical process continued. When Dr. Noah confirmed that the implantation had succeeded, the world seemed to tilt. "You're officially pregnant," he said with a gentle smile. I felt the breath rush out of me. I wasn't just part of a contract anymore. I was carrying a life, one that bound me to this house, this man, and this new version of myself. Alexander stood in the doorway of the exam room as Noah spoke. His eyes settled on me with an expression I couldn't fully decipher: relief, wonder, fear. When he stepped forward, he placed a hand lightly on my shoulder. "We'll do this together," he said. The words shouldn't have meant as much as they did, but they wrapped around me with a warmth I hadn't expected. Later that night, I lay awake listening to the quiet hum of the estate. Liam's laughter still echoed faintly in my mind. Alexander's hand still lingered on my skin. I had come here to fulfill a contract, yet somehow, without meaning to, I was becoming part of something much more dangerous. A home I wasn't sure I'd ever want to leave. When does a contract start to feel like a family? The question slipped into my mind the moment I saw Alexander kneel beside Liam, fastening his seatbelt with a tenderness that didn't match the man I thought I knew. He smoothed Liam's hair, murmured something that made the boy laugh, and for a fleeting second, I felt something warm flicker in my chest. Dangerous, hopeful, wrong. That morning set the tone for everything that followed. At breakfast, he noticed I barely touched my food. Without asking, he told the chef to bring something lighter, something he claimed would settle the nausea. Later, when I stepped outside to breathe in the crisp air, a chilly breeze swept across the garden. Before I could retreat, a warm coat settled over my shoulders. Alexander stood behind me, hands tucked into his pockets as if the gesture had escaped him before he could stop it. Neither of us spoke, but the silence wasn't strained, it was unsettlingly gentle. Sleep wouldn't come that night. I wandered down to the library, its golden lamps casting quiet pools of light on the floor. I curled up in one of the chairs with a book I wasn't really reading. Minutes later, footsteps approached. Alexander emerged from the shadows, surprise flickering across his face before he took the seat across from me. We didn't speak at first. We didn't need to. The stillness folded around us like a blanket. Eventually he broke it. "When you were little, what did your mother read to you?" The question was so intimate it made my pulse jump. "Old fairy tales," I said. "Ones about princesses who didn't need saving." He nodded slowly, gaze drifting to the shelves behind me. "And your mother?" I ventured. His jaw tightened, and he glanced away. "I don't remember her voice anymore," he whispered, barely audible. The honesty of it hit me like a blow, sharp, vulnerable, real. The next afternoon, Liam dragged him outside to play catch. Alexander was, to put it kindly, terrible. The ball sailed past him, bounced off his shoulder, and once smacked him in the knee. Liam collapsed laughing, and before I knew it, Alexander was laughing too soft at first, then unguarded. Gloria watched from the doorway, her eyes misty. "I haven't seen him smile like that in 15 years, she murmured. But not everything was light. One evening, as we drove back from a doctor's appointment, paparazzi swarmed the car. Their flashes exploded across the windows, their shouting muffled but frantic. Panic gripped me. Alexander reached across the seat, his fingers wrapping around mine with firm, steady pressure. "No one will scare you," he said. "Not while I'm here." The word "you" felt too close. The way he said it felt even closer. Nights became the most dangerous. I would sometimes pass Alexander in the hall, standing outside my door as if he needed to make sure Liam and I were safe before retreating to his own room. He didn't acknowledge me when I caught him there, but the truth was unmistakable. Something inside him was shifting. The day Noah confirmed the pregnancy was stable, Alexander went still as stone. He stood beside me, staring at the ultrasound screen like it was the first real thing he had ever seen. "I didn't expect to feel this," he said, voice husky. I looked at him then and saw fear, awe, and something softer forming in the cracks. Later, on the balcony, the breeze brushed past us. Alexander stepped out, placing a hand near my shoulder as if shielding me from the wind. We stood so close, our breaths mingled. His eyes dipped to my lips for a single, suspended heartbeat, then he stepped back. "I won't do anything you're not ready for," he whispered. His restraint felt more intimate than any touch could have been. That night, I lay in bed with my hand resting gently over my stomach. A tiny life stirred within me, but it wasn't the only thing growing. Fear. Hope. Something unbearably fragile. I didn't know which terrified me more, bringing a child into this house, or falling in love with the man responsible for it. Happiness, I learned, is far more frightening than sorrow. Sorrow is familiar, steady, predictable, a shadow you know how to live beside. Happiness is the thing that can vanish, and I had too much to lose now. The estate no longer felt like a place I was passing through. My footsteps no longer hesitated on the polished floors. Liam decorated the kitchen with drawings, and no one removed them. I helped in the garden sometimes. I laughed more than I should have. The mansion began to look less like a gilded cage and more like a home, and that realization scared me senseless. Alexander noticed things he had never noticed before. He told the chauffeur to drive slower when the road was uneven. He ordered new furniture for my room made from natural fibers after learning the old ones carried chemical traces. When Gloria teased him that he was taking care of me like a wife, he didn't deny it, he only cleared his throat and changed the subject. One evening, the three of us sat down to dinner. It should have been ordinary, but watching Liam animatedly recount his lesson about volcanoes, while Alexander leaned in, fully engaged, I felt tears burn behind my eyes. For the first time in my life, I saw what a family dinner could look like, what stability felt like, what love might one day become, and the more real it felt, the more terrified I became. So I pulled back. I avoided Alexander's gaze. I kept conversations short. I walked around him like he was something fragile I might break or something dangerous that might break me. He noticed immediately. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked quietly one night. I shook my head, unable to admit the truth. I was falling for him, and every beat of that feeling was a countdown to heartbreak. Then, while cleaning my room, I found the contract, buried but not forgotten. The last line stabbed through me. "The mother will leave permanently after delivery." My breath hitched, my chest tightened. Every moment with him, every kindness, was temporary. I was temporary. Alexander wrestled with his own storm. I knew it the moment he showed up at Noah's office unannounced. He tried to mask his reason for being there, but Noah saw through him easily. "You're not just worried about the baby," Noah said gently. "You're worried about Ariana." Alexander didn't answer. He didn't need to. The turning point came on an ordinary staircase on an ordinary afternoon. My foot slipped. A sudden jolt shot through me, and I gasped as my body pitched forward. Before fear could fully form, strong arms caught me. My vision blurred as Alexander held me against his chest, breath racing. "Don't ever do that again," he said, voice shaking. "I can't," he stopped, swallowing hard. "I can't lose something important again." Important. The word lodged deep. Later, in the quiet of my room, I asked him the question burning in my chest. "Why do you care so much?" He paused too long, then looked at me with an honesty I wasn't prepared for. "Because not everything in my life is replaceable," he said. "And you're not." I opened my mouth, but before I could respond, a sharp tug rippled across my stomach. Breathless, I placed a hand over the swell of my belly. A warning. A beginning. Something was coming. I felt it in the way the air shifted around us, in the way his eyes widened when he saw me flinch, in the way my heart braced itself. Inside me, A child was growing. But between us, something far more dangerous was taking shape, something neither of us dared call by its real name. And it was only a matter of time before the storm broke. The storm started inside me long before the rain hit the windows. I woke in the middle of the night with a sharp, dragging pain that made my breath break in half. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, rain slamming against the glass like warning fists. I gripped the edge of the mattress, trying not to cry out, trying not to wake Liam. But another contraction hit deeper, harder, and my knees buckled as I slid to the floor. "Mama?" Liam's small voice cracked through the darkness. He rushed to my side, eyes wide with terror. "I'm okay," I lied, breathless. Go get Alexander." He didn't hesitate. His little feet pounded down the hallway, and seconds later the door burst open. Alexander rushed inside, hair tousled, barefoot, half-dressed, nothing like the controlled, calculated man I knew. His face drained of all color the moment he saw me curled forward on the carpet. "Ariana." He dropped to his knees. "Look at me. I'm here. Kozno." His hands shook as he lifted me effortlessly into his arms. I'd never seen fear on him, not once, not until now. "Gloria," he bellowed. "Get the car, now." Rain hammered down as we hurried outside. He set me gently in the back seat, then climbed in beside me, ignoring the chauffeur's protests. His arm wrapped around me as another contraction tore through my core. "Breathe," he whispered. "No," begged. "Stay with me. Don't leave me. Don't leave our child. Our child." The words struck harder than the pain. On the highway, the storm was blinding, the car swaying as wind shoved at its sides. I gripped Alexander's hand, as if it were the only stable thing in the world. He kept brushing hair from my face, kept whispering, "You're okay. I've got you. I won't lose you." By the time we reached the hospital, the world had dissolved into urgency, voices shouting, machines beeping, nurses rushing. But Alexander refused to step away from me, even when the staff insisted. "She needs space," one nurse said. "I'm not leaving," he snapped. "Not tonight, not ever again." When the contractions intensified, I cried out, fingers clutching his shirt. "I'm scared," I said through tears. His forehead pressed to mine. "I know, but I'm here. I'm not letting you go." Hours blurred, pain, pressure, fear. His voice anchoring me every second. Then one piercing cry split the room. "A son. Ours." Alexander froze. His eyes widened, his lips trembling. When the nurse placed the baby in his arms, something unbreakable shattered inside him. He let out a sound that wasn't quite a sob, wasn't quite a laugh, something raw and human and stripped bare. "He's perfect," he whispered. When he carried our son to me, his hands still shook. Then he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out the folded contract, the one that had bound our lives in cold ink, and tore it in half. Then again, letting the pieces scatter across the hospital floor like dead leaves. "No more restrictions," he said, voice low but unwavering. "No more clauses, no more leaving. I don't want you bound to me by a contract." He touched my cheek gently, reverently. "I don't need someone to give me a child," he whispered. "I need a family, and I need you, if you'll have me." My tears came silently. In that small hospital room, with rain softening against the windows and his son sleeping against his chest, Alexander Pierce finally broke open, and so did I. Morning sunlight spilled across the room as if the storm had never existed. The world felt impossibly still. I blinked awake to the softest sight I had ever witnessed. Alexander asleep in a chair, our newborn curled on his chest, his hand protectively cupping the baby's back. I had never seen a man look so strong and so vulnerable at once. Liam crept into the room quietly. The second he saw the baby, his entire face lit up. "Is that my brother?" Alexander woke, actually smiling. "Yes," he said. "Come meet him." Liam climbed into his lap, and for the first time, the four of us existed in one frame, messy, tired, fragile, but whole. When we returned to Pierce Estate days later, something had shifted in the air. The staff no longer treated me like a temporary guest. Gloria hugged me as if welcoming a daughter home. "This house isn't just his anymore," she whispered. "It belongs to you now." But new fears crept in. Was I enough for this world? Was Alexander acting out of emotion, or did he truly want me to stay? I worried about the gap between our lives, his empire, my debt, his pedigree, my past, his power, my fragility. But he saw everything in me before I spoke a word of it. One night, after Liam had gone to bed and the baby was asleep, he found me in the nursery staring at the crib. "You're afraid," he said softly. "I don't fit your life," I admitted. "And I don't want to stay here just because you felt something in the hospital." He stepped closer, eyes steady. "Ariana, I didn't fall for you in a hospital room," he said quietly. "I fell for you when you chose your son over pride. When you faced fear and walked into my world anyway. When you carried a child that wasn't meant to be yours. And you loved him before he ever existed." Then he told me the last truth he had held on to. "My father left after my mother died. I learned early that people leave. I built everything I have to make sure no one could hurt me again. But you," he swallowed, "you broke through every wall I built." His voice softened to a whisper. "You are not here because I need an heir. You are here because I need you, and because you are the only person who has ever made this house feel like a home." I felt my last defense crumble. He stepped back, picked up the newborn with remarkable tenderness, then lowered himself to one knee. "Ariana Hale," he said, holding his son against his heart, "you are no longer bound by obligation. But if you'll allow it, I want to spend the rest of my life bound to you." Liam burst through the doorway at the worst and best possible moment. "Say yes, Mom," he yelled. I laughed through tears, nodding before my heart could catch up. "Yes, Alexander, yes." The wedding was small, soft, and impossibly sincere, held in the garden where Liam first chased butterflies. No headlines, no spectators, just people who mattered. Liam carried the rings proudly. Gloria cried. Alexander kissed me like someone who had been waiting a lifetime. At sunset, I watched him holding our children, his suit wrinkled, hair tousled, expression peaceful in a way I had never seen. It struck me then how far we had come. I had arrived at Pierce Estate as a woman who had been bought, but I stayed because I was finally, undeniably, chosen, and this time, the choice was mine too. Life doesn't always wait for the right moment to test us. It shows up uninvited, heavy, and impossible to ignore. But even in those hardest chapters, there's a quiet reminder that we can rise, rebuild, and choose a future that looks nothing like the past we came from. Hope doesn't appear all at once. It grows from small choices, tiny acts of courage, and the belief that better days are worth reaching for. As you're listening right now, maybe late at night, maybe during a slow afternoon, maybe while the weather outside mirrors your mood, feel free to drop a comment about where you're tuning in from. Sometimes sharing something simple opens the door to deeper connection. And if these stories make you feel seen or a little less alone, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next one. We'll keep choosing hope together.